The most famous of the women who had anything to do with the army were the women who dressed as men and fought. We don't know how many of them there were, because if they got away with it, the military records just have a man's name. We do know that if they were caught, there was a big double standard. If you're caught disguising yourself as a man, and my students always say, how could they do that? Because they didn't have a beard. I said, neither did 16-year-old boys in the 18th century. You know, maturation, puberty now comes, what, when you're 9? But then, as I tell my students, they hadn't even gotten their bar mitzvah voice yet. I mean, their voices had not changed. So all a girl had to do, if she even had breasts, was tie them down, cut her hair, and she could pass for a young boy. So if you did this and somehow you were found out, if you said, oh, I only did it because my fiancé is in this regiment and I missed him so much and I wanted to be near him, please don't be mad at me, they sent them home. If instead they said, I'm really marking my age, like Arlo Guthrie when he went, you know, I want to kill. If they said, I wanted to be a soldier, that's why I signed up, then they were whores. And then they were marched out of the army camp, stripped to the waist, tied behind a wagon while someone flogged them, and a tune was played by the fife and drum that came to be known as the Whore's March. So we know about those women, but there were who knows how many women who got away with this. The most famous of these women was a woman named Deborah Sampson Gannett. There's a marvelous book written by Al Young about her called Masquerade. You will not believe her story, and I can't explain it to you really. She was a strapping young woman whose family had sold her into indenture. She was an indentured servant since she was 5 years old, did domestic work. She was now about 18. And when she heard the war, she would never get married because she had no dowry. Then, as now, if you did domestic work, women's work, you got paid way less than men who did field work, and she could never put aside enough money. She heard that they were giving bonuses to men who signed up, you know, like in the NBA. You got a signing bonus. So she said, She put on man's clothes, and she went to nearby Connecticut, and she signed up for the army, and they gave her a bonus, and she said, boy, this is really nice. She went home, she put her dress and her apron back on. She said, I think I'm going to do this again. For reasons we don't really know, she decided to do it again as Private Robert Shurtleff, and she stayed in the army for 3.5 years. And Al Young has documented she had affairs with young women. I don't know how. I don't know how far the affair went. I don't know what was going on. She drank in the taverns. She cursed like a man. No one knew she was a woman. For 3.5 years, she was wounded twice. And finally, they discovered she was a woman when she came down after the war was over. I mean, in 1781, but they hadn't signed the treaty yet. She came down with what they call camp fever. Any fever you had was called camp fever. And the doctor opened her shirt to investigate, and out popped breasts. There is a wonderful 19th century painting of this event. You know, by the late 19th century, high Victorian era, when they used to cover up piano legs because men might be excited by, you know, this was, let me tell you, they got nothing on us today. You know, a man could be excited by the sight of an ankle, right? So there's a painting, a version of Deborah Sampson being discovered. Lying on the ground is a soldier in one of those fluffy white blouses that Johnny Depp wore in Pirates of the Caribbean, right, you know, with the big sleeves. And for reasons that are inexplicable, an entire regiment of men are standing in a circle around this person. There's a beam of light shining down on her. The doctor has opened her shirt, and a rosy breast has popped out, and all of the men are going. Trust me, in the 18th century, that wouldn't have happened. In the 18th century, people pooped and belched at the table. They'd all seen animals having sex by the time they were 6. I mean, they were coarse. George Washington, they had to mark out of his letters. The original publisher of his letters had to ink out, black out all his vulgarisms in the letters. And it wasn't until the 20th century when, during World War I think it was, they discovered infrared light that could read things, and they read the letters and they went, oh boy, you know, he had quite a mouth on him. So the men would not have been going like this. The Army gave her an honorable discharge. I mean, she was a combat soldier for 3.5 years. They gave her an honorable discharge. She went back to Massachusetts, and she stayed dressed as a man because field work paid more than domestic work. And she did this for a couple of years, and then, as she tells, she was illiterate herself, but she gave her autobiography to a man named Thomas Mann, not Thomas Mann, Death in Venice, just Thomas Mann. And he wrote this down, that she said, it was a spring day, the birds were singing, the flowers were out, I went into the house and put on my bonnet and my apron, and she got married and had 5 kids. Now, Deborah Sampson Gannett, applied for a veteran's pension, and Paul Revere helped her get it. She got a veteran's pension. She took her show on the road all around New England. She would, you know, they didn't have movies or anything, so lectures like this, they were the hot entertainment, right? So she would get up on the stage, dressed in a woman's dress, and she would say, I was so moved by patriotism and my desire, she didn't mention bonus, my desire to serve my country, that I became a soldier. And then she would say, please forgive me for this transgression. And then she would march off the stage and come out in her uniform, and she'd do a few, you know, military movements, and she would lift her gun, and then they would pass the hat, right? So she made good money doing this. When Deborah Sampson Gannett died, her husband sued for a widow's pension, and he got it, right? How many Deborah Sampson Gannetts there were, we will really never know. Those of you who are Civil War buffs know that one reason we know about a lot of the women who did the same thing is they were very fond, it became a fad, to take photographs, you know, because photography now had been invented, of themselves in their uniform, and then photographs of themselves in their female clothes, and put them on postcards and send them out. So we know about a lot of those women, but it's very hard, unless they were marched out of the camp, for us to know how many of these women there were.